Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Justice Parada 1988 podcast. We're now on season 2, the very first episode. So, the first thing I wanted to say right away is I wanted to explore how the you compose, we perform mentality is almost cult like if it's taken too far. And one thing I did is that I put this into Gemini, which is kind of like ChatGPT, in order to help me get a framework of this. And then here's one of the things that it said, which is the you compose, we perform mentality is part of a larger philosophical framework known as Werktreuer, and that is spelled Werktreue. And Werktreue is German for faithfulness to the work. This shift occurred primarily in the 19th century, transforming music from a living improvisational practice into the curation of static objects. Okay, one of the questions I had was, is it a cult mentality? In musicology, scholars like Lydia Gurr describe the imaginary museum of musical works as a system that imposes rigid behavioral norms. When forced on virtuoso composer performers, it can indeed feel cult-like because it demands total submission. The performer is expected to be a transparent medium for the composer's divine intent, stifles agency. As you noted, the separation of the roles is often artificial. Before the 1800s, figures like Bach or Mozart viewed the score as blueprints or recipes rather than sacred scripture. Sacralizes the score the idea that a composer can tweak a work, like different versions of Bach's Prelude and Fugue in C minor, or the Bach A major Prelude and Fugue. The Bach A major is 536 and the C minor is 549, suggests that the work was never a fixed object but a process. Forcing a performer to play only one specific version as the definitive truth ignores the historical reality of music as a fluid, evolving craft. And I have a link to Lydia Gurr's work in the chat. The next thing I looked at was the physical argument on notes as reps. Your comparison to Jim repetitions is insightful. This touches on the embodied cognition of music. The body-instrument connection, a composer-performer writes for their own physiological capabilities. When a third party, a critic or conductor, demands a specific interpretation against the performer's will, they are effectively demanding a physical feat that may not align with what the performer's unique body hand size is capable of. Loss of somatic knowledge in the you compose, we perform model. The performer's physical know-how is subordinated to an abstract mental concept of the score. This ignores the fact that the music is an athletic and biological event as much as an intellectual one. This is going back to the Jesse Montgomery quote that I talked about previously in the Alice Hong episodes of my podcast from the last season, which discuss the physical nature of creating music at the instrument. Link to those episodes in the chat. What I wanted to mention next is in terms of cults. There are two real cults that come to mind for me, and a third cult, which is completely fictional, that in some ways resembles the two cults I will mention. The two cults that I think of, the first one I think of is Jim Jones, where they purposely isolated themselves in the jungles of Guyana. And this is like the composer being isolated from performing their own music. The second cult that I am reminded of is Hale Bopp. And in terms of Hale Bopp, they were into absolute perfection. They isolated themselves in a mansion, and they believed if they shed their human containers, they would be able to follow Halley's Comet in their afterlife. Ironically, this would have been about a year or like 9 months before the Hale Bopp incident, and there was a TV episode of the sci-fi TV show Babylon 5. I will get into it in the next video, called Gray 17 is Missing. What happens in that episode is there is a workman who goes missing, and upon finding out what happened to this workman, the security advisor, Michael Garibaldi, discovers that a cult has taken over the 17th floor of the industrial portion of the space station. I will delve into why I think the cult from Gray 17 is missing is very similar to the cults I discussed previously, along with the cult of absolute perfection, which I should mention. That is key in the cult of Gray 17. Absolute perfection and finding a purity of purpose and a purity of thought. So take care and see you in episode 2.